In this lesson, we'll develop an image using the essential tools, explore the history of what we've done, and do a little bit of cropping and maybe erasing part of an image that we don't want to see. The first image that we're going to work with is a beach shot, and the problem with shooting a beach is the skies are always really bright and the ground or the foreground always tends to be dark in relation to that. And we're going to use the essential tools to really make this image balanced and pop. The first thing I like to do when I develop an image is use the AI Enhance tools. And I like to slide that slider to the right and just see what it does to the picture. And as you can see, it's already opened things up a little bit and improved this image. I'm going to take advantage of the Sky Enhance too, because obviously there is sky in this image. But I'm not going to push it too much because it doesn't need that much enhancement. Next, I'm going to improve the structure of this because there is a lot of detail with the water and with the foreground we have the rocks. So let's move AI structure over to the right, and this is going to start giving me that pop that I'm looking for. Now, this could be fine right here, but I really want to bring out that foreground. The rocks in the foreground are a little bit dark, they're black, and I think my viewer is going to get lost in the right side of the image. So I'm going to step up to the light tool, and I can open up my shadows with the slider at the very bottom of that area. And as I move it to the right, we start seeing a lot more of the information in those rocks to the right, and I can just move it back and forth until it feels comfortable. Another thing I want to make sure is that I don't blow out my whites or my highlights. And that's the problem when shooting water, is a lot of times you lose detail. If I zoom in here, white is pretty blown out. So I want to just bring this down a little bit. I'm going to recover some of my highlights here so that water actually has a little bit more detail. Now, whenever I'm developing an image, it's really helpful for me to see where I've come from, because sometimes we forget how much we've done to an image because our brain just automatically senses, oh yeah, this is great, and you keep tweaking, and you might be already there or 95% there. So I'm going to click up here and look at a side-by-side, and to the left is the before, the image that I had that I opened up. And as you can see, the foreground is dark and the sky doesn't pop. But right there, by moving this over, you can see how much better this image is. Now at this point I'm happy, but sometimes I like to play with the sliders to see if I can make it better, and that's one of the great things is I get that immediate feedback to see if this slider is going to make my picture better or not really do much at all because the picture is already there. So I'm going to use Smart Contrast, and Smart Contrast is great. It expands the dynamic range and really brings things out. And one thing that I noticed right away is that the water spray looks so much better with the Smart Contrast slider slid a little bit to the right. And I think the last thing I'm going to do, and this is a great little trick, it's working with color. And if you look at color, there's two sliders, saturation and vibrance. Now, vibrance is smart saturation. The way it works is that if a color is muted, it makes it more saturated, but if it's already saturated, it won't keep pumping it up. And that's the problem with using just the saturation slider. So I'm a big fan of vibrance. It's already pretty vibrant as it is. So what I'm going to do is bring the saturation down just a little bit so my image is a little more muted, and then bring up the vibrance, and this is going to balance out the saturation in my image. I'm really happy with this. Let's take a quick look at the before and after. That's a big difference, and I was able to achieve all of this using the essential tools. Now, the essential tools are great, but a lot of times when you're working with an image, being able to crop it just right and position it is important, and sometimes there's extra things in an image, stop signs, people, that you want to remove, and you can do that very easily in Luminar 4. The next image I'm going to open is a shot that I took outside of the Louvre in Paris. And I just grabbed this image. I thought it was really neat. It was a wedding shoot, and to me it was like, this could be a really cool image. I just had to run and gun it, and there's a lot more information here in the picture than I need to show for my final image. So the first thing I want to do is I want to crop this and maybe straighten it a little bit. You can find crop and rotate in the canvas tools. In addition to crop and rotate, you can use the erase and clone and stamp tools to remove unwanted objects from your image. Let's go ahead and crop this image and straighten it up a little bit. When you click on the crop and rotate button, you have the choice of changing the angle by clicking the angle button. If I move that left and right, I can straighten my image. And I'm going to straighten it kind of to my eye. I have a nice little grid here, so I'll get that eyeballing kind of straight. That's pretty good. And now I want to start cropping this image. By default, the aspect ratio is locked. So it's going to keep the same aspect ratio as the original image if I start making it bigger and smaller by grabbing one of the corners. I want to step outside of that aspect ratio. And to do that, I click on the lock button. It goes from yellow to white. And now I can go ahead and move just different areas of my image to really get the framing that I want. And I want to take advantage of the rule of thirds. And I'm going to just cut in a little bit here. I like this. I want to get a little bit of the water. I think that's much more interesting. And all I need to do is click on Done. And now I've successfully cropped this image. And I think this is kind of interesting. I'll probably stylize it, but I have another problem that I think is distracting. The man whose head is popping out from the dress and his feet are popping out from below the dress, I think is distracting. I think it'll be a much nicer image if I can remove him. And I'm going to do that with the clone and stamp tool. And that will allow me to easily grab another part of the image and clone that and stamp it over where he is. So the first thing I want to do is zoom in to get much closer so I can work in with much more detail. I can go to the drop down here. It's at 53% of its original size. I can take it to 100 or maybe 200%, and now I can really see what I want to remove. If you hold down the space bar, you'll get a little hand, and now I can reposition this around the frame so I can easily focus on removing this person. The next thing I want to do is click a source area to copy from, and that's the little circle with the crosshair. I'm going to pick this area right here, and then I can move my cursor over, and now I can simply paint him away using that other part of the building and slowly go down. And if I want to, I can make my paintbrush a little bit smaller. I like to use the left and right bracket keys on the keyboard, and that allows me to make it smaller by clicking on the left bracket keys. And I'm going to, again, paint. Now you want to be careful because if I keep painting at this point, I'm going to start painting in her hand. So I want to select a different part. I'm going to hold down the Option key, and now I can start painting him out of the image. And you can pick different areas if you want to paint it out. And one nice thing that really works well is if you want to smooth things out, I sometimes take the opacity of the clone and stamp tool and bring it down to about 50%, and that way I can pick different areas to start painting in, and that lets me smooth out and make it look a lot more natural when I'm painting out his head. And I can zoom in even a little bit tighter and grab another area here and just smoothly paint that out. Now let's go ahead and remove his feet from the image pretty much the same way. Now, to set your source point, it's Alt clicking on an area on a PC or Option clicking on your Mac to select the source area. And once again, I'll just go down here, select a piece that's at the bottom. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger just so I can do this a little more quickly, and I'll bring it back to opacity of 100%. And just for fine tuning, I'll make the brush a little bit smaller, once again using the left bracket key. And if I wanted to, I could really zoom in and get this precisely at the edge of the dress. But I think for this demonstration, and also the fact that once we zoom out to full screen, people aren't going to be looking for what's missing in this image. And as you can see, much more interesting of an image now that I've removed this person